in 2012. Then he began to work for the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, first as a planner, then deputy director in 2017, and then he became the executive director in 2019. Kevin has been serving as the city engineer for Milwaukee since the fall of 2012. The city engineer is responsible for everything from planning new bridges to filling potholes. Wow. Humbling, for sure.
It is.
The city engineer also oversees the design and implementation of street reconstruction projects that serve everyone using the streets, whether for walking, biking, transit, or driving. Kevin's going to overview his work, and there will be time for questions after his 45-minute presentation. Let's give him a welcome. Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Bob forgot the most important part of that, which is that my wife and I lived next to Bob and Sonia for 10 years as well. So only moved last October. So.
You have a 5-year-old son that's just precious.
Yeah, as Bob said, and thank you for that kind introduction, my name is Kevin Muhs. I serve as the city engineer for the city of Milwaukee. As Bob kind of alluded to, the city engineer is a position that has a wide-ranging set of responsibilities. Essentially, the easiest way to think about it is I'm the director of the infrastructure for the city. So the waterworks is its own private utility, but any other publicly owned asset in the public right-of-way is essentially my responsibility. So that means all of our movable and fixed bridges, green infrastructure, bioswales, sewers, those sorts of things, roadway design, which is what I'm going to talk about mostly today, pothole filling, streetlights that go out, traffic signals, those types of things as well. So yes, I'm responsible for the -- and #2 most frequent complaint to every aldermanic office in the city, potholes and streetlight outages. And just think if there's anything else. Oh, just one correction, 2022 is when I've been the city engineer for 3 years now, and joined, it is an appointed position, similar to another commissioner or director level position within the city, so I joined the administration soon after Mayor Johnson became Mayor Johnson. So that's kind of an overview. So what I'm going to go through today, based on Bob's suggestion, is just kind of an overview of what we're working on in the city. We are working in some interesting contexts, which I'll get into. There's many challenges in the city. Obviously, I only touch some of them, but we are also making a lot of changes fairly quickly to the roads in the city, and that's different than what we used to do. And so that's going to primarily be the focus of my presentation, kind of talking about why and what we're doing. Everything we're doing, as I said, I'm a part of the mayor's administration, so everything we're doing is in the context of the mayor's overall vision for the city, of trying to make Milwaukee a safer, higher quality, and more attractive place for residents. The mayor, when he ran in the special election to replace former Mayor Barrett, his actual first campaign plank was around reckless driving and trying to improve safety on our streets. And so this isn't a criticism of Tom Barrett, but that was not, Tom Barrett was not pushing public infrastructure forward as a key part of his campaign in the same way that Mayor Johnson chose to. And so that #1 right on the list there, eliminate reckless driving and eliminate traffic fatalities, have long been kind of core to what the mayor sees the purpose of city government as. He also wants to invest in neighborhood infrastructure to help grow Milwaukee. We have a lot of old and beat up infrastructure in the city, and we need to improve the quality of it if we're going to have a fighting chance in continuing to make the city a more attractive place to live and do business. Streets as places for people and places for commerce. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means and why that's a bit of a tweak in the vision for the city. And then consistent with the city's climate and equity goals, we're also trying to reduce it's called single occupancy vehicle trips, but basically short trips, less than 2 miles where people are driving alone. We want to give people alternative options to make those trips just to reduce overall traffic and the pollution associated with driving your car. So that's the big vision for the city when it comes to the transportation network. We have a very difficult context we're working in. Like many other Northeastern and Mid and Great Lakes cities, our city existed before the automobile, and the freeway system in particular was retrofitted into the city. And so we still run into challenges in talking with neighborhoods and residents regarding the psychic damage from urban renewal and from the freeway expansions in the city. I'm not necessarily saying those were the right decision or the wrong decision, but there is kind of trauma associated with that. And so when we, as the Department of Public Works, go into a community and talk about a street project, the first thing they want to know is, are we going to take all their homes? Which is not a thing the city has done in more than 50 years now, but it is still part of the narrative of a lot of the communities we work in, especially the neighborhoods just in the ring right around downtown. And so that's one key part of this. The other thing that happened when the freeway system was built, which, to be clear, the city of Milwaukee supported at the time it was being built. It's not like the city government was opposed to it when it was being built. The other thing that happened is it removed a significant amount of the city's taxable land off the property rolls and made it non-taxable land. And so that's one of the reasons we have fiscal challenges in the city. There are several, including overall poverty and things like that. But we do have a relatively lower proportion of our land that's taxable, partially because of all the large nonprofit institutions we host in the city, like the universities and the hospital systems, but also because of our choices in how we designed our public infrastructure. And we're struggling to pay for it now. That's more of a state comment than a city comment, because the state is responsible for the freeways. There's federal funding opportunities, which I'll talk a little bit more about, especially under the Biden administration, and we did a really good job of taking advantage of those. I'd like to think we put together really excellent applications, but it also helps to have been a blue city in a purple state. And so they were interested in shoveling some money Milwaukee's way, which we took advantage of as best we could. But that federal money can't go to local streets. Federal money across the country, federal transportation dollars, only goes to a street basically as small as Lake Drive or Silver Spring and above. It doesn't go to anything that's smaller than those types of streets. And so that means that our local roads in the city continue to decline in quality, even though some of our major arterials are getting better and better when it comes to quality. I'm trying to think what else to highlight here. The state. So the city has long had a challenged relationship with the state, particularly when it comes to transportation decisions. There's still some challenges there. We are better partners than we once were, trying to work together on things. But again, the state, generally speaking, does not invest in local transportation. There are very, very few programs that the state pushes some of the gas tax revenue towards local governments. So when you're paying your gas taxes, almost none of that is going to the street you live on. That is generally through either a local vehicle registration fee, which is what we use in Milwaukee, or your property taxes. And so the state is not really a contributor to improving the local road quality situation in any municipality across the state. Oops, sorry about that. And then something that other challenges we have, so obviously this means the public is frustrated with us most of the time because they see potholes and they're like, why can you not fix my potholes? They see terrible incidents where them or their family members have been harmed or their friends have been harmed in a crash or some sort of other traffic-related incident, and they're frustrated about that. Their streetlights are off, they're upset about that. The big picture is that we have a lot of old infrastructure in the city and we don't have enough resources to maintain it. There was also a choice made during actually the Norquist administration, if you can go that far back, to not invest in local public infrastructure. The local road budget for much of the Norquist administration was zero, and it takes about 25 years for your roads to decline to the point in which everybody is upset and mad about that. And so it doesn't matter necessarily that in 2010, 2012-ish is when Mayor Barrett really boosted the local road budget back up. So we're back at the amount we should be to be able to maintain our roads, but we still have another 2 to 3 decades of decline because of how long it takes for road infrastructure to fall apart. So if we were to really improve the roads in the city of Milwaukee, it would require a surge of resources, which the city doesn't really have at its disposal. It primarily would have to be a conversation with the state to bring those resources to bear. Yeah, all right. So we're trying to do these, and I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit more to talk about safety, but that the challenge of just not having well-maintained infrastructure overarches all of this. So when we're working on the safety challenge in the city, this has been a long-running conversation. The city started to see fatalities, so deaths and life-changing injuries, where someone is maimed or paralyzed or something like that in a crash. Started to see those increase around 2015, 2014. Before that point, they'd been following the national trend of them going down. Something broke around 2014, 2015. It's the phones in all of our pockets. That's my opinion. But then the pandemic really, really accelerated it, where I think partially because the streets were so empty, partially maybe because of just the social, societal challenges we had during that time period, and also we had MPD and enforcement challenges within the city as well. All of that kind of combined, where we went from right around 30 to 35 people dying due to transportation every year in the city to 80 in 2020. And so that's the context of the political appetite to do something about that. So in the Department of Public Works, we've been working on developing for a while a series of strategies. So I just want to talk about what those are. So on the top left there is a little snapshot just at the title page of the Complete Streets Handbook. So the city adopted a Complete Streets policy, one of the best in the country, according to some of the national organizations that work on these things, in 2018. We then, and I'll explain what each of these are as we go. In the bottom middle there is Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a concept where you're pushing towards zero deaths due to transportation and zero life-changing injuries due to transportation. The city council and the mayor signed a declaration and a resolution committing us to be a Vision Zero city by 2037. So 2022, 15 years to 2037 is our target year for that. A tall order, maybe not possible, but it is good to have that target of getting to zero. And now we are also within the Department of Public Works. Right now, we're undergoing a citywide transportation and mobility planning effort called 414 in motion. And that's the logo in the top right. And I'll talk about each of these a little bit more here. So what is a complete street? The basic concept of a complete street, and this is kind of an engineering and planning term within the transportation field, is that everybody on the street who should be using that street has a dedicated spot for them to be and a safe and comfortable place for them to be. So that includes thinking about allocating space to modes that we maybe haven't allocated space to in recent history, like people biking, people taking transit, making sure that the crosswalks are safe, making sure that it's a pleasant environment. We have some complete streets in our region already, for sure, but we also have a lot of streets that are very hostile to people who are outside of cars in particular. And so the idea behind the complete streets is to get that so that everybody can feel comfortable. It doesn't mean that every street has to squish in every mode. So perfect example right near the church here. Silver Spring, I would say, is a pretty good complete street. It's a comfortable street. It's relatively reasonably good to cross, not by Stone Creek, but further down. And it's generally a pleasant place to be. Most cars drive slowly, and it's a pretty good shared space. There's not a specific space dedicated for bikes on that street. That doesn't mean it's not a complete street, as long as you're thinking about other ways to give people who want to bike around a safe path to make a parallel journey. So it doesn't have to mean you squish everything on a street that's more constrained by the buildings like Silver Spring is. Sorry, I had to change my, last minute had to change my presentation ratio so that it fit on the projector. So some things might get a little weird, I apologize. So switching gears to Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is more of a systemic level approach. There is a transportation design element to it, which is what I'm in charge of, but there's also an enforcement piece to it. There's a public education piece to it. And so Vision Zero really has some key tenets. One is, in the name, death and serious injury due to transportation are unacceptable. We need to figure out how to pull that out of our system. Humans make mistakes. You need to understand that humans will make mistakes, and you need to design your system in a resilient way so that those mistakes don't kill someone else. Humans are vulnerable as well. We are very squishy compared to the very large objects we drive around that are steel and very hard. And so the people in particular who are outside the vehicles, but even people in the vehicles, obviously can be harmed by those vehicles. Responsibility is shared, and this is kind of a counterpoint to our historical approach to to accidents and crashes, which has been that the driver made a mistake and the driver just needs to do a better job. Some of that is true, but the idea here with responsibility is shared is that the people who design the roads, like me, also bear responsibility for making sure that we're giving drivers the right cues, that we're encouraging drivers to drive the appropriate speed for the context, and bring some of those design features in to make sure that we're understanding, again, that the humans make mistakes. And reducing that risk requires being proactive to design the safety in. What's on the right side of the screen there is actually a standard public health risk assessment triangle. It's not just public health, the military uses this as well, applied to the Vision Zero concept. And so what this is trying to argue is that historically we've focused towards the top of the pyramid when it comes to safety and transportation, which is everybody doing the right thing, so individual actions, which is still important, but effectiveness on a societal level actually increases when you focus on the base things that don't require individuals to always be perfect and always make the right decision. And so there's things that we can do that will encourage people to not need to drive so much. So thinking about where your housing is and who can afford that housing, thinking about your public transit and features like that. And then thinking about in black, the built environment, which is a kind of a jargony way of saying, what does the road feel like? What is it made up of? Is it encouraging people to drive at safe speeds where there might also be pedestrians around or people biking, those sorts of things? And then moving up through into enforcement and then education at the top. So why am I talking so much about speed? The core of Vision Zero when it comes to mixed environments where people are walking and there are cars is really focused on the speed dynamic. And the reason is because speed, I'm actually gonna take this from the bottom up, speed determines survivability. So if a pedestrian is hit by a car at 20 miles per hour, basically only 1 out of 10 pedestrians will die in that circumstance. If they're hit by someone going 30 miles an hour, it's more like 40% death or serious injury. And if they're hit by someone going 40 miles an hour, it's more like 3/4. So 3 out of 4 people will die or have a serious injury if they're hit at that speed. The other two lines talk about from the driver's perspective. So it may not be super easy to see, but we get tunnel vision the faster we go. We're looking further down the road. We're less likely to see what is next to us or closer to us, and therefore we're less likely to respond at all. And then in the second row with the stop signs, or third row with the stop signs, if we do see, it takes us much longer to react and stop if we're driving faster. So that's why we're focused on speed with a lot of the things we're doing on a design, from a design perspective in Milwaukee. The Dutch, who are among the best at this in the world, they use the concept of homogeneity. And what they mean by that is that you should try to design a street or an urban context, a public right-of-way, in a way that the mass, so the weight and size, the speed, and the direction of travel is as close together as possible. So they generally work on, and getting back to complete streets, the Dutch do not try to fit every mode onto every street. They focus on, is it appropriate for people walking or biking to be next to a car that is this size or going this fast? And if it isn't appropriate, how do we make sure people walking and biking can get around and make a similar journey? And so that's the safety piece. Kind of to build on that and that homogeneity concept, the freeway is one of the safest places for drivers. Obviously, if you do get in a crash on a freeway, they can be very grisly because of the speeds involved, but crashes are significantly less likely per mile travel on the freeway than on any other street type we have in the country, and that's because everybody's going roughly the same speed, all the things are big metal boxes that weigh a fair amount, and the directions are split. And in fact, for those of you who have lived in the metro area for a while, you might remember some of the more challenging crashes we've had in the freeway system are where the directions weren't properly split. Ozaukee County in particular had a number of pretty gruesome crashes where people crossed the ditch on I-43, and that's why they put in those metal cables to try to hold cars and separate them. I guess what I'm saying is that Dutch concept of homogeneity we have an example where it works in the US, which is the freeway system. We just have to think about how to apply it to places that aren't freeways. So I mentioned that Vision Zero is about a lot more than just the engineers, me, getting this stuff right. So the city does have a Vision Zero action plan now, adopted within the past year, and it has 7 overarching goals. So number 1 is DPW, who I work for. So build safe streets for all users, prioritizing the high injury network. We'll talk about what that is in a moment. But number 2 is support accountability in the justice system with a focus on prevention. So this is a whole bunch of folks involved: the city attorney, the district attorney, the Milwaukee Police Department, the court system, the judges, municipal court, and the circuit court, depending on the level of the crime. And this is something the city has been working very hard on. In fact, just within the past week, we had a pretty big victory in this, which is that MPD is now authorized to directly impound the vehicle of someone who is charged with reckless driving when it happens. That was not a thing we were allowed to do under state statutes until recently. So the state statute changed thanks to a partnership with the state legislature and the governor, and now the Common Council within the past couple weeks adopted that change into city ordinance. So now MPD, they pull someone over, they ticket them for reckless driving, they can prevent them from getting back in the car, and they can also take possession of that car and bring it to the city's tow lot. So those are the types of accountability measures that the city's been very strongly supporting, and there are more that we would like to do as well. Number 3, create vibrant, people-centered places. The idea here is to redirect some of our right-of-way away from cars to make our communities places where people want to be. One of the big challenges we have in the city is a lot of people are scared of the roads. I often have conversations with residents that say, well, I don't drive on Fond du Lac, I don't drive on Capitol, or if I do, I definitely don't do it at night. And the big challenge people have is they just don't feel comfortable with those roads. Well, think about what that does to the property values of the properties near those roads, right? That is a significant drain on the economic vitality of the neighborhoods that those streets go through. And so we want to push back on that. It's bad for the city, it's bad for the residents, it's bad for the businesses. Number 4 is promoting traffic safety through communication, encouragement, and education. Driver's ed. We're trying to get the state to update some of our driver's ed approaches to be a little more reflective of modern times. We're working with them on that. But also proactive communication to remind folks of what the laws are. And also when we introduce something new, which we've been doing, how do we do a better job of communicating to drivers? How do you actually navigate around that thing, that new piece of concrete that's in a weird spot? Timely and effective EMS and medical care, which is the fire department's primary job within the city. Safer vehicles, so there are things that we can do to make our vehicles safer. We used to be very proactive on this front in the US. We've gotten less proactive over the past decade or so. So that's more of a federal decision, but the city's advocating for it. And then the state law changes we need to accomplish these things. So Vision Zero, I talked about that being a pretty lofty goal, and it is a lofty goal, but it is not a completely impossible thing to picture. So Hoboken, New Jersey, which is a suburb or a part of the New York City metro area, has actually gone 8 years without a traffic fatality within their boundaries. Oslo, Norway, which is a much larger city than Hoboken, has in 2019 and in 2023 had no traffic fatalities. So it is something that is, again, challenging to picture how we get there, but it's not completely impossible to think that we'll at least get close. So part of our job with, again, working for the mayor directly is trying to turn the mayor's overall vision into targets that we can measure and we can talk about with the public and see if we are achieving our targets. So one of the key ones I already talked about is Vision Zero. So where are we on that? I mentioned we were at it's 88 traffic fatalities in 2020. I had that number wrong in my head. By 2024, it had improved. It was down to 74. That's not a great improvement. We're hoping to see that accelerate. 2025 does look like it's going better, so hopefully that number continues to drop more aggressively. We are seeing other cities in the country that are seeing larger percentage drops. Chicago's just dropped 30% year over year between 23 and 24. And so we want to move more aggressively to try to push that down as best we can using all those Vision Zero tenets that I talked about. Another thing that the mayor really is very passionate about is making sure that people can get around no matter how they want to in the city, and really trying to catch up with some of our competitors, other cities across the country when it comes to bike infrastructure. So what's in the top left there is our dashboard tracking our goals. So the mayor set a goal in 2023, June 2023, that we would hit 50 miles of what's called protected bike facilities under development, which means funded or all the way through construction by the end of 2026. We actually hit it through we hit that goal already in mid-2025, which means we've got a lot of money to do this, but not a lot. We now need to move it to construction. What is a protected bike facility? A protected bike facility is a facility where people biking are somehow physically separated from the moving vehicles as much as possible. So that might be with a concrete curb, so the bike lane might be behind a concrete curb. We've got a few examples of that in the city. We're building a lot more. It might be on the other side of parked cars. So if you've parked on Kilbourne Avenue in Milwaukee or Walnut Street, I'm trying to think if there's any others that people might have regularly used. Van Buren, thank you, that's the new one. We're West Michigan Street right now. So if you've parked away from the curb and found that to be kind of a what the heck is going on here, that is part of what we're trying to do. It's not the only reason we're doing the parking spots there, but that's part of it, is to get the people biking closer to the curb and use the parked cars as a barrier to try to keep them safer while they're biking. We have other targets that we could set in the city. We could set targets for overall speed or speeding reductions, excessive speeding reductions as a percentage. We could set targets for mode shift. We could set targets for depaving. We do have too many paved roads, or too much pavement in the city, too wide of roads, generally speaking. We're going through that 414 emotion plan to try to help work with the community to set those targets and figure out what they should be. If you want to, you can go ahead and look at this QR code quickly and take a survey to help us guide that plan. Anybody who travels in the city of Milwaukee is welcome to contribute to that plan and help us plan the future of the city. We've just started that, so I expect that that'll probably be done sometime maybe late 2026 will be the goal for completing that planning effort. And if there's more interest, I can bring that slide up at the end as well. So how are we trying to do this? So I talked about all the plans and the goals and the targets. We are building the plane while we're flying it. So the mayor is an elected official. Elected officials in many parts of the country, including in Wisconsin, run on 2 or 4 year cycles. The mayor's office runs on a 4-year cycle. If I went to the mayor and said, cool, this is a great idea, mayor, we need to figure out everything we're gonna do before we start doing it, he'd say, that's great, that's gonna take my first 2 terms, so what are you gonna do after that when I'm not mayor anymore? And so we are, and obviously the reckless driving crisis was kind of a very pressing, it is still a pressing thing, but it was extremely pressing a couple years ago, and we were having lots of town halls, lots of upset residents, lots of people asking us to do something. And so we're building that plane while we're flying it to try to implement things as we go. That does mean we're iterating and we're learning, and so adjustments will need to be made and are already being made, but we'll continue to go back to a project after it's been out for 2 to 3 years and see if we don't need to tweak it. Someone mentioned Van Buren. There's 2 intersections on Van Buren that I would like to go out there and change some things today if I had the money. When we do next have money, we will be modifying a couple things. If you experience it regularly, the corner of Ogden and Van Buren, if you're heading north and going east, that is a little tight, especially for the Route 30 bus that makes that turn regularly. And then Juneau is the other one. So those we would probably adjust if we, now knowing what we know, we would have adjusted those originally, and we will go back when we have the resources, probably in the next couple years, to tweak those a little bit. So we're trying to take every opportunity. So each of these pictures represents a different context of that. So one is, on the top left there, is actually a community-led traffic calming effort. This is Grant Boulevard in the Sherman Park neighborhood, where they are using, this is a temporary installation, actually two winters ago now. We provided them materials from our traffic calming lending library, little rubber curves and the plastic sticks, to go out there and try out different shapes of, this is called the traffic circle, so different shapes of traffic circles, different ways to arrange it to see what they thought. The idea behind that traffic calming lending library is then members of the public can come to us with a formal request. There's a signature process to do community-led traffic calming. That signature process means more than half the people, more than half of the addresses on a block or the parcels on a block that would be impacted have to say they're interested, so they have to sign a petition. Because when it comes time to actually build something, 30% of the cost, 33% of the cost of that improvement comes through as a special assessment. And so we want people to be bought in before we do the design, and we want them to understand that they've got skin in the game. And so that's that program is how many of the speed humps, almost all the speed humps across the city have been installed. We have more than 1,200 speed humps, and they're almost always installed that way. Most of the traffic calming on a residential street, especially if it's not next to a school, was initiated by resident petitions. And so that is how we do a lot of the traffic calming in the residential parts of the city. The bottom left there is some pieces of concrete poured on top of the road. That's Oakland and Newberry Boulevard next to Riverside Park. This is an example of you could do this type of improvement with the community-led traffic calming program, but this project was actually a DPW-initiated project. And so this is an independent safety project. There's no paving project in the area that we did by looking at our high injury network, which I didn't explain very well, right here in the top right, by looking at our high injury network and identifying places we can make targeted safety improvements. The high injury network is where more than 60% of the fatalities and life-changing injuries occur in the city, and it's less than 10% of our mileage. An overwhelming majority of that, or not majority, sorry, an overwhelmingly large amount of that mileage, like 40% of that mileage is actually state highways in the city, and there's another 10% or so that are county, so about half of it we directly control, but we do try to target our high injury network with improvements if they're coming from the department rather than coming from the community. There we go. And then top left is, top right is a normal mill and overlay asphalt resurfacing project where we remove the top 2 to 3 inches of asphalt and we throw down 2 to 3 inches of new asphalt. This is Highland Boulevard next to Harley-Davidson and Molson Coors. But what we did at this point and what we're doing now is anytime it's ready to make that type of investment in a street, we look at our high injury network data, we look at the crash data, we look at the traffic volumes and determine, is there something different we can do? Highland Boulevard used to be 2 lanes in each direction, plus a striped bike lane, plus a parking lane, which means it's 36 feet wide, curb to curb, and then a median, and then 36 feet on the other side. So double-sized street, basically. We looked at the traffic volumes and determined that we could reduce a driving lane in each direction and generally not cause too much congestion in doing so. And so we reallocated that space to bikes, but more excuse me, more importantly, shortened the crossing distances, because those were the crashes we were seeing here, was people were going really fast down Highland. They were whipping around the corner because it makes a turn as it heads towards Washington Park. And they were hitting or coming close to hitting the pedestrians crossing the street. So Molson Coors, Harley, and the neighborhood residents all were very interested in seeing us slow the street down, and this is how we did it. And it was pretty successful. I've got some data later to share. I'm okay, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. And then bottom right is the full big reconstruct the street. This is what we just did on Lake Drive. It's what Shorewood is doing right now on Lake Drive, finishing up hopefully by Thanksgiving. And so this is an example of Walnut Street in Milwaukee from 12th to 20th, basically just west of I-43. Similar context as Highland, except for it was time for the whole street to be rebuilt. So it was 36 feet on either side of a median, so 72 feet wide of concrete altogether, and it was really low traffic volumes. And so we shrunk the curbs way in, added an extra row of trees, put really a bike path up next to the sidewalk behind the curb. There was very little on-street parking, so we were able to remove a lot of the parking and narrow it down to, in some cases, the curb to curb is only 14 feet when it's only one lane of traffic with no parking. So this is kind of a shining example of the future vision for the city. This is also the first street that was started and has been completed since that Complete Streets policy was adopted in 2018. So just quickly taking you through a couple examples here of what this looks like. So Galena Street in Washington Park, east of the Washington Park. This is an example of a safe speeds retrofit with a paving project in a residential neighborhood on a local street. The street, unusually for a residential street, experienced pretty regular high speeds because it connects 40th Street, which is where the eastern edge of the park, to 35th, and then east to 27th. And so people were using Galena as a cut-through rather than going on Lisbon, Walnut, or on Vliet to the north and the south. And the residents were really sick of it. And so they approached us basically saying, let's do something different here. So it was time for repaving, so we looked at some different approaches. So before, this is what Galena looked like, a wide but fairly standard residential street in the city. Washington Park and the Senior Center is to your left. Bethune Academy is to your right, which is a school. And you could go in a straight line if you were a driver. You could go a straight line basically as fast as you would like, and you wouldn't probably run into anything unless you lost control of your vehicle. After this project and working with the neighborhood, we threw down concrete. So there's, we call them pinned-on bump outs or curb extensions that are on either side of the curb that were added, and then traffic circles in concrete in the middle there. These have actually since been painted by students of Bethune Academy, so they look a little less boring and ugly now. And the whole idea here is at the intersections where there's people crossing, where there might be kids going to and from school, we want people to think about what they're doing and slow down and have to navigate some pieces of concrete. And so this, the need to make that maneuver, shown in green, slows people down and encourages people to drive in a safer speed. Another example, Lapham Boulevard on the south side. This was similar to Highland. It's 2 lanes in each direction. There's a city park right there. That's the path into the park. And this is the parking lot for South Division High School, one of the biggest high schools in the city, down there. And so it's a very busy and dense neighborhood. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of homes. This is actually one of the densest census tracts in the state of Wisconsin. And a lot of people walking and driving and busing to South Division since it's such a large school. So before this project in 2022, it was 2 lanes in a straight line, a fair amount of speeding. We, not with a paving project, separately retrofitted the street by putting floating parking in. So the parking is now away from the curb using paint and also those plastic posts, those shorter plastic posts that you might be familiar with. So we went from this to 1 lane in each direction, and it really improved the speeding issue on the street. So a 70% decrease in people speeding at all, a significant, an elimination almost entirely of people going more than 10 miles over the speed limit, and the median speed actually dropped below the speed limit, which is very atypical in the city of Milwaukee. So that was a very successful project. We're also now, as I talked about, iterating. Next year, we're going to be going back. We're actually repaving Lapham Boulevard, and we're using what we learned to modify it. So there will be there will be some concrete curb extensions. We're putting in bioswales, so there'll be some green infrastructure, some aesthetic improvements for the neighborhood, as well as the new pavement and some other safety improvements as well. I think I'll skip over Walnut here. Yeah, we'll just go straight to this. The city has been doing this on as wide a scale as we can. We've had the speed hump, the community-led traffic calming program was formed in 2007. It really accelerated around 2019, 2020 when we saw the reckless driving issue become more and more prominent with the public. So those purplish dots on the left are all of the speed humps in the city. The reason I show this map is because there's some perceptions out there, including by some of our alders, that this program serves the wealthier parts of the city. And that is clearly not the case. If you know the map of incomes in Milwaukee and the racial dynamics in Milwaukee, you know that this is not a map of where the rich people live. It's the opposite. And so the north side and the south side have been really at the forefront of this for a long time, maybe because they saw reckless driving first, but also they've been demanding it. And paying with their own money to make it happen. And they don't often sometimes have a lot of money, so I think that says something. Traffic circles and bump outs are shown on the right. The bump outs, so little concrete islands, are in orange. The traffic circles are in blue. Almost all of these have been built since 2022. So these are almost all DPW initiated projects. A lot of them you'll notice are linear in lines because these are on our high injury network. So these are ones that my department has been putting out there and irritating many drivers in the city ever since. So we do collect data on this because we want to know if what we're doing is effective or not. Our goal as engineers and planners is to get to the point where we have enough data where we know what types of interventions are most effective in what contexts. The basic thing we're trying to do here from an engineering principle perspective is to get people to slow down. You either need to do something horizontally, so horizontal deflection, make people go right or left, or somehow shrink their feeling of how much space they have, or you have to do something vertical deflection. You have to make the car go up and down. And so those are really our options. It all boils down to that if you're talking about using physical infrastructure to influence speeds. And so we want to understand among those options what's working best where. So yeah, Highland Boulevard, we saw a 76% decrease in people driving more than 40 miles an hour. Oklahoma Avenue near Humboldt Park used to be a raceway. There's actually a very famous YouTube or TikTok or whatever video streaming service you want to use, video of somebody dodging around a yellow bus and then slamming into the back of a parked car because they were trying to pass a school bus on the right. You can't do that anymore because now there's concrete in the way. So we've seen a significant decrease in crashes on Oklahoma Avenue since this was implemented as well. I won't read this all to you, partially because it got a little bit cut off, but this is the sort of data collection we're doing. So we collect, again, I talked about speed earlier. We collect speed data, before and after speed data, because that's an easy proxy for us to figure out, are we making the roads safer? We are also collecting crash data, but you need to give yourself 3 to 5 years after the road change to really see statistically did it have an improvement in crashes. There's a randomness to crashes. There are all sorts of things that I can't control as an engineer that can go wrong in a crash. In fact, we did have a crash on that Oklahoma Avenue improvement. We had a crash after we made the improvement, and there was a fatality in that crash. It was a driver who turned into the wrong way. So he was confused about where he was. It was at night. It was an older gentleman. He was confused about where he was. He was blinded by the headlights of an oncoming car, lost control, and ran into a tree. And he passed away in that crash. So not that there's no engineering solutions to that, but that's not necessarily the solution or the problem we were designing for, right? And so that's the challenge with just using crashes. So we use speed as a proxy for this, and somewhere between good, pretty successful, to really successful on every corridor that we've tried to make changes on. So we're pretty happy about that. The other thing we're working on, as I talked about, is trying to find more resources. So we were very aggressive during the Biden administration. All these headlines are from the Biden administration on figuring out ways to identify more funds. Another tool we have in the city that we are leveraging very, very highly to a degree that we didn't before the Johnson administration is tax increment financing. So the state statute that enables tax increment financing districts, as the increment on the original project is paid off, you are given, you basically extend the TID for a year and use that additional revenue to do public infrastructure improvements within a half mile of the original district. And so basically everything that's happening downtown is being paid for by a TID. We're not using city property tax levy dollars for that. And we're trying to do it in the neighborhoods around downtown as well. We want to reuse right away to make things a little bit more, again, economically successful. There's some examples here of closing extra pavement and turning it into a canvas for some artists. And also on the left here, in partnership with the East Side Business Improvement District, closing a little stretch of Ivanhoe, which was kind of a surplus street there, and turning it into a pedestrian plaza, which is going to be enhanced even further in the future. We have a lot of ongoing projects and upcoming projects. If there's questions about those, I can answer them, but National Avenue, Prospect Farwell is coming to 5 or 6 years from now. National Avenue starts next year. Sherman Boulevard between North and Capitol is going to be reconstructed in 2028 and 2029. Literally hundreds of projects, and those are just some of the big ones. I'm happy to talk about that more if you'd like. That's what I've got.
Oh, so. Who has the first question? All right.
Okay. I have a question. I currently live in South Milwaukee, so
Maybe it's not on.
Okay, I have a question. I personally live in South Milwaukee, and I work on the east side of Milwaukee Capital. So, and I'm very familiar now with the Sun Prospect.
Yep.
My question is, whose idea is it, or I know it's in the planning stage, for the reconstruction of 794 where they want to take part of it down,
Sure.
when you have all, and then thinking about the additional traffic, and then now you have the 40 or I-94 construction that just started for the next 8 years. Combine all that traffic congestion.
Yep.
Do you really think that it's a wise move that they should do anything with 794 and just keep it the way it is instead of tearing it down and making it even a bigger mess?
Well, yeah, so 794 that's a WISDOT-led initiative. The city and the county are close partners on it because it is part of the freeway network. One note is that portions of it need to be torn down and perhaps replaced, no matter what, because they're part of the original freeway construction back from the 70s. So there will be disruption related to that whenever that does happen. So the stretch, it doesn't impact the Hone Bridge. The stretch between the lakefront and the Marquette interchange is the part that's being discussed right now. There are three primary options that they're looking at. One is full removal and replacement with a boulevard of some sort, very similar to what we did with the Park East Freeway 20 years ago now, and McKinley Boulevard replacing it. There's improvement options, which would help modernize the freeway and make things a little bit safer, and also give a little bit more room on the ground level for development. And then there's replace in kind. So the city's official position on that is we are working with the state to study the options and trying to wait for more data to come out. We just had public involvement meetings, so the data is now out on the 794 Lake Interchange Study website, if you want to Google that, for traffic. What we're waiting for now is costs for different alternatives, which is not going to come till spring or summer, and also a look at the economic development potential of the land if we are to move parts or eliminate parts of the freeway system.
When would that be starting? Because I heard, well, I know 94 is going to be an 8-year
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And have they ever thought about just closing down like part of the areas that they want to during a festival season, or during one of the festivals, just to see what the traffic congestion would be like
Yeah.
on
Yep.
Broadway and the whole, on the Third Ward?
Sure.
Because if they take it down, this is what's going to happen on Broadway and Juno, the whole, and people will not go down there because number one, they won't be able to park down there. They will not be able to drive down there. And it's a safety issue right now with the bikes, with the scooters, that they don't know how to drive
Mm-hmm.
on Water Street. They do not know how to drive anywhere down there. They're just going back and forth and they don't care. And it's
Yeah.
impacting all the, there've been a lot more traffic accidents lately down there, at least not fatalities, because of that. So how are they going to address that?
Yeah, so as far as taking it down or closing it off during a festival season, I don't think we would ever be so bold. Partially because,
Experiment.
well,
Like one weekend of a festival. Okay, we're going to close this down for maybe even a day. See what happens.
yeah.
You'd probably be surprised.
Well, I don't think we'd be surprised. I think we know what would happen. I think, the idea is, what I would say is if removal is selected, and I think politically that's fairly unlikely, but if removal is selected as the choice, part of what we would be doing with removal is modifying the street network on the ground to help accommodate some of the change in traffic patterns, right? And so just shutting 794 down now with our existing street network doesn't make any sense, and it wouldn't work. It would all be in how you would mitigate that if you did decide to remove the freeway. So,
And then the Clybourne exit is a fiasco.
Clybourne exit.
Right near the end of Silvercrest, when you're turning.
Sure.
turning off.
Yes. Yes.
That's the biggest mistake they made.
I think that was probably, yes, I think there's a lot of regret all the way around with that decision, which is why all the alternatives except replace in kind think about how to do that differently. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got
Gentleman
a
with the mic
question about the, when you create the bike lane, for example, I've been on Lake Drive and it's narrowed down and you've got these like curbs in the bike lane on the other side. Now typically what I see is that some of these little raised portions of a divide don't have any color or paint to indicate it's there. And I found that a little confusing the first time I tried it. But I would also think that compared to the like I-94 coming in from the west, you look at all the driving on 94, the lines that were on the road have worn out now after many years. And if it's raining and it's dark, you can't see them. So what I'm suggesting on those raised portions, you paint them with a reflective paint. So when headlights hit them in the dark, they're much easier to see than if you just paint them yellow. Because yellow will fade and wear out, whereas reflective, even though some of it wears off, you're still going to see the reflection to know that you have to stay in the lane. You can't stay far to the right because you've got this thing there that you might hit.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point. That's an interesting project because, as we know, multiple parts of Lake Drive were under construction at once. So all of it is part of State Highway 32, including the part right here. And so the state were good partners with us on that, but not everything that was done on that project is how the city would have chosen to do it, I guess. I'll just put it that way. So the state is much more firm on following specific types of federal guidance. And one of those things is on the right side of the driver should only be white, because the yellow is a center lane, or a center line, right? And the white is the right edge line. Sorry, I reversed that for you. And so the posts that are on Lake Drive, which are interesting looking posts, but the posts that are on Lake Drive have white reflectors on them because of that. We would have rather they have been, we use green most of the time in the city because it pops, especially against snow. They were not interested in that. And then I do think, so the noses of the concrete are painted, but you're right that it's not a continuous along the side. I do think that's a good point. We could look into doing that. We'll probably see how our first winter goes and determine from there what we're going to modify going forward. So, yep.
A number of us volunteer at Sojourner Family Peace Center at 6th and Walnut, and every time we go, we comment that we better pay attention in this intersection. So when we're coming south, you have these, I don't know any of the right terminology, but these sort of concrete squares that are just sort of there. Is the purpose of that to basically make it one lane there?
Yes. Yeah, there's some challenges with that part of 6th Street, but yeah, that's the idea, is that it's one lane.
And then my real question is whatever they're called that are sticking up, the posts, on the off chance that we should bump them, are they flexible or firm?
Those are flexible.
Oh, that's good.
They're actually called flex posts.
Okay.
So they are bendable pieces of plastic, essentially. And so they're rated to get hit, but hopefully that's not me. They're rated to get hit by semis 60 times before they break, supposedly. I don't know that they actually quite make it that far, but that's what the manufacturer claims. So, yeah. Yep.
Well, that wasn't going to be my question, but I live near UWM and just north of Locust Street, and certainly those little stakes have been regularly mowed down about every week on the bridge. So I don't know how effective those are. But in my neighborhood, several years ago, we had 2 of those smaller traffic circles put in, and then one micro one that I don't know what purpose it is.
Yeah, the one on Cambridge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I live on Cambridge. So, but my question is, I think they've been singularly ineffective in that, especially the one closer to Riverside High School, it's been planted and the neighbors take care of it, and there's been a tree put up in the center of it, which at least 3 times now has had to be replaced because people just drive through the thing because there's no deterrent. And my question is, in the future, when building these things, is there any reason they couldn't be built a little higher so that cars can't just drive over them and keep going? Because they don't work, in our neighborhood at least.
Yeah. So, I would say they do work, but you're pointing out points at which they fail, right? Which is correct. So those were the first traffic circles. Okay, hopefully. Those were the first traffic circles in the city. And they were built maybe mid-2000s, mid-aughts, something like that. And so we were being very cautious as a department to make sure in particular that school buses could get through. And that's why you have those rolled curbs. I think what we would do now is we might do a lower rolled curb, but then we would put a normal curb on the inside of it so that you can't drive straight through the center of it. And that would be the goal. In fact, the one on Maryland and Linwood, not too far from there, is newer. And that one has a nice 6-inch vertical curb on it and a nice planter that the neighbors have put in the middle. So.
One more question. Okay. Yeah, Kevin, thanks for being here. I don't envy your job. I appreciate some of the data you shared. As an industry, 100,000-foot view, as an industry, or even thinking back to like your formal education, do you expect like transportation education or moving, having to move a lot of people from one place to another? Do you think like the philosophy and the things that are used are going to change in the future? Is that in the sector? You go to conferences and things. Are you constantly learning about are we going to continue to see changes in transportation networks? And like, have you already started to see those changes? Like, are you implementing things like that already?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think most industries evolve, right? And so transportation engineering is definitely evolving. Some of what I talked about here is a recognition that we kind of let design principles from an engineering perspective that are really good solutions for suburban or rural parts of the country get applied to urban parts of the country. And so there is a philosophy correction in the direction that I'm talking about kind of across the country in urban environments to think a lot more about speed and whether or not people need to be going 40 or 50 miles an hour on an urban street. Autonomous vehicles is another big one. The big challenge with that has just been keeping up with how the technology is evolving. I think we are getting closer to understanding what it's going to look like. For a while, there were discussions that we were going to have to modify our infrastructure to enable autonomous vehicles, and then those of us who manage infrastructure laughed in their faces and were like, well, if you got $8 trillion, we can do that for you across the country. But I'm just making up a number, but it's giant. And so basically the computing's gotten better, the programming's gotten better, and so now they are more adaptive to what we're doing. I think what's exciting and what's coming is vehicle to infrastructure communication. And so more dynamic traffic signals, maybe in areas where there aren't a lot of pedestrians, maybe you don't need traffic signals anymore because if the cars are talking to each other, you would be able for everybody to navigate seamlessly. So those types of things are things we're tracking and talking about at conferences. Whether or not we're ready to pull the trigger on an infrastructure investment, probably not yet. The benefit of Milwaukee is that we are one of the hardest environments for an autonomous vehicle to operate in. So we'll be able to see what they do in the desert and in the non-snowy areas long before they come here and really successfully operate in our environment with all the snow and everything like that. So, yeah.
Amazing. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.